Hi guys, I'm Megan Brightwood and welcome to my channel. So today I have a how to knit video for you, which I know you guys do really enjoy. They take a while to make, so there's a good amount of time between tutorials, but I do enjoy them. So I'm hoping to make more. I know I've had a few of you asking. One of the projects that I want to make next is going to be a baby blanket. I've had a lot of requests for that, so just know that that is coming. But before I get into today's how to knit video, I did want to do my typical thing at the beginning of these videos and tell you a little bit about the sweater that I am currently wearing. So this is the Puntilla by Joji Locatelli. I absolutely love it. It's so comfortable and it was really easy to do. It has a nice little exposed seam right here, but it's worked seamlessly. Awesome pattern, love it. It does have an option to put lace detailing on the cuffs and the bottom hem, which I obviously did not do, but it is a really cool little added detail that she includes. And my particular sweater was made out of the Malabrigo sock yarn in the colorway Pearl. Absolutely love it. I wear it a ton and I've had it for probably 3 or 4 years and it's gotten a lot of use. So anyway, now that that's done, let's talk about the project that we are going to be working on today. So a little while ago, I was asked if I would do a men's sock tutorial. And so when I was thinking about it, I thought, you know what I should do is just expand upon the how to knit sock video that I've already done on this channel. And I can link that video down below if you want to check it out. But that sock looks like this. So it's just a simple ribbed sock, but this was knit for myself and I wear a size 8. So it's a little bit smaller than something that my husband, who wears 11.5, would wear. So I figured I'm just gonna add a size to my first pattern, and I will include the written instructions down below so you can see the video, you can see the written instructions, all of that information is there for you. And the men's sock that I'm going to be showing you how to knit today is this one. So you can see it is a little bit bigger. It's bigger around and a little longer. You can also alter the sizing based on the needle size. So I used a US 2 or 2.75 millimeter needle to make both of these, but you could up your needle size to make a larger size. You could lower it to make a smaller size. It's totally up to you. But anyway, this one that we're going to be working on today was made out of a Regia native 4-ply yarn, and it is in the colorway Origin. I really like how it turned out. So let's hop into how to make this sock. For this project, I'm going to be using size US 2 or 2.75 knitting needles with a cable, and the yarn that I'm going to be using is this Regia native color yarn, and this is in the colorway Origin. So I'm going to start off with a German twisted cast on, and the reason that I like this particular cast on method is that it has a very similar look to a long tail cast on, which is my favorite cast on, but it does also have a good amount of stretch, which is really good for things that have a ribbed texture, so like socks, gloves, mittens, hats, different things like that. I like to use a German twisted cast on. So I'm going to start with a slip knot here and slip that right on to the end of my needle. And then I have the tail of my yarn here and my working yarn in my right hand. And I'm going to take my left hand here and bring my thumb underneath that yarn. And I'm going to take my needle under both of those strands and pick up that second one going underneath and over. Then I'm going to wrap my working yarn around and bring that loop over to create another stitch. So once again, I'm bringing my thumb underneath, going under with my needle, grabbing that second loop, wrapping my working yarn around, and bringing that loop over the needle and off my thumb. So now I have 3 stitches here, and I'm going to continue working until I have 72 stitches on my needles. Going around, over, and dropping it off. Once I've cast on 72 stitches, I'm going to find the middle of those stitches. So I have 36 on one side and 36 on the other. And I'm going to just kind of bend my needle here so that I can split those 36 stitches up. And I'm going to push all these ones that I'd started with onto my opposite needle. And I'm going to start working in the round using the magic loop method, but before I do that, I do also want to take a moment to make sure that all of my stitches are straight and even, because if they are not, that's going to create a twist and it's just not going to work out correctly. So let's just double check that everything is nice and neat. Once everything looks nice and neat, I'm going to go ahead and start knitting in the round. So I've got my working yarn here, and I like to knot the tail of my yarn just so I don't get confused between the 2 strands here, especially right at the beginning. I do have a tendency to pick up the tail of my yarn and start knitting, and that just doesn't get you very far. So what I'm going to do is grab the tail of my yarn, or not the tail of my yarn, my working yarn here, and then that back needle, I'm going to pull that out and I can start knitting. So I'm going to work in K2 P2 ribbing for 7 inches for the leg of my sock, but I do want to do it just a little bit differently. So I'm going to start with a knit stitch here, bring my yarn around and through, and then I'm going to immediately go into purl stitches. So I'm going to purl 2, and then I'm going to bring my yarn back through the middle there and knit 2. And this is just going to keep everything nice and even and neat when we get to the heel flap. Now I'm going to bring my yarn back forward and do 2 purl stitches. And it just makes things a little bit easier if you start out like this. So I'm going to work K2, or knit 2 stitches, bring my yarn forward, purl 2 stitches, all the way around. And because I started with 1 knit stitch, then I'm going to end with 1 knit stitch. So I'm going to keep knitting until this first group of stitches is done. And when I get to the end of this first group of stitches, you can see that I'm ending on a knit stitch. And to continue working in the round, what I'm going to do is turn my work, and then I'm going to start working on the stitches that were on hold that first go round. So I'm going to slip all of these onto my needle. Then I'm going to pull that back needle out, and we're ready to work across that second group of stitches. So I'm going to start once again with 1 knit stitch. Then I'm going to bring it forward for 2 purl stitches. Bring my yarn back for 2 knit stitches. Bring it forward for 2 purl stitches, all the way around to the beginning of my sock. Just as before, I'm going to end with 2 purl stitches, followed by a knit stitch, and I have reached the beginning of my round. So I'm going to again turn my work, push those those stitches that I'd had on hold back up to my needle, pull that back needle out and I can continue working in K2 P2 ribbing, starting with a knit stitch, with a singular knit stitch. And I'm going to continue working like this until the leg of my sock measures about 7 inches or however long you'd like the leg to be. So now that my sock measures about 7 inches from the cast on edge, I'm going to start working on the heel flap. And in order to do the heel flap, I'm just going to work on the first 36 stitches here and leave the second set just hanging out, not doing anything. And I'm going to do a 2-row repeat here. So on the first row, I'm going to slip that first stitch purlwise, and then I'm going to knit the next stitch, and I'm going to repeat that all across the row. So I'm going to slip one purlwise, knit the next stitch, slip purlwise, knit the next stitch, until I have worked the first 36 stitches. So as I'm ending on that first 36 stitches, rather than continue working in the round, I'm going to turn my work and work back on the same stitches that I was just knitting. So I'm going to slip that first stitch purlwise, which is going to create a selvage edge, and I'm going to purl all the way back to where I started. So I'm going to purl 36 stitches. When I reach the beginning of my work again, I'm going to turn so that the right side of my sock is facing me again, and I'm going to repeat those 2 rows 17 more times for a total of 18 repeats or 36 rows. So once again, I'm going to slip that first stitch purlwise, knit the next stitch, slip purlwise, knit the next stitch, and I'm going to continue like this for the first 36 stitches. Then I'm going to turn my work again, slip that first stitch purlwise, and purl to the end. And I'm going to continue working like that until I have knit a total of 36 rows. I just finished working the stitches for the heel flap, and if you're having trouble keeping track of how many rows you've worked, one easy way to count is to go to the wrong side of your fabric and look for these longer stitches. These are where we slipped stitches, and if you go ahead and count up how many of those you have, then that is how many repeats you've done. So if you've got 18, then you are ready to go. So now we're going to start turning the heel, and this is probably my favorite part of knitting socks because you can see a huge change really quickly. I mean, right now it just looks like a tube, and once you've turned the heel, it really starts to take shape. So to do that, we're going to slip the first stitch purlwise, and then we're going to knit 19 stitches as normal. So we're going to knit 1, 2, 3, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. And then we're going to knit the next 2 stitches together in an SSK or slip slip knit. So I'm going to slip that first stitch knitwise, slip the second stitch knitwise, and then I'm going to take my left hand needle and starting with that first slipped stitch, I'm going to go back through so that I'm knitting the back of both of those stitches. And I'm going to knit them together as one. So now I have 1 stitch rather than 2. I'm going to knit 1 more stitch here. And then, even though I haven't completed all of my row, I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to slip that first stitch and purl the next 5. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then I'm going to work the next 2 stitches together in a purl 2 together. So I'm going to go right through the first 2 stitches on my left hand needle and purl them as if they were 1 stitch. So there again, I've taken 2 stitches and gone down to 1. I'm going to purl 1 more stitch, and now again I'm going to go ahead and turn my work. From here I'm going to work a 2-row pattern using these little gaps as my marker. As you can see, this is where we decreased the first time. So I'm going to knit until 1 stitch before that gap. So I'm going to slip that first stitch purlwise and then knit to 1 before that gap. And right here, I have my gap and I'm going to slip, slip, knit again. So slip the first and second stitches knitwise, and then knit them through the back loop. Knit 1 more stitch, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn my work. I'm going to slip that first stitch purlwise, and now I'm going to purl until that next gap. So we're kind of incorporating a couple stitches on every row, and we're going to continue working like this until all of the stitches have been worked. So I'm going to purl until 1 stitch before that gap, purl the next 2 stitches together, purl 1 more stitch, and turn my work. Once again, I'm going to slip that first stitch purlwise, knit to 1 before the gap, work a slip, slip, knit, knit 1, and turn, slip that first stitch purlwise, purl to 1 before the gap, and then purl 2 together, purl 1, and turn. So we're going to keep going until all of these stitches have been worked, but you can already see that turning the heel is already making a little pocket where your heel will go. So we'll just keep on going. When you get to the end of your heel turn, you'll notice that there is not another stitch on the other side of the gap for you to knit after decreasing. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll do a slip, slip, knit on the right side, and then just turn where I am, and then I'll also purl the last 2 stitches together without worrying about that extra stitch. So I'm going to purl those last 2 stitches together, and that is it for my heel turn. So now you can see that there's a nice little pocket for the heel, and we're going to set everything up for working in the round again, get those gusset stitches done, and start working on the foot. So to do that, I'm going to knit across all of these stitches from my heel turn until I reach the end. And then when I get to the end here, I'm going to look at the side of my heel flap here. And this might be a little tricky to see, but we do have a selvage edge here, and there should be 18 of these selvage stitches. So I'm going to pick up 1 stitch in each of those selvage stitches. 1, 2, 3, and 18. And now all of these stitches, so the stitches that I will be working the gusset over as well as the sole of the foot, are going to be on this half of my needle. So I'm going to kind of adjust things a little bit here. And now I'm going to work on the top of the foot. So I'm going to work all of these stitches as they come up. So the first stitch is a knit stitch here. I'm going to go ahead and knit that. And then you can see I've got a couple of purl stitches here. So I'm going to purl 1 and 2, a couple more knit stitches. And I'm going to work like this all the way across the top of the foot, making sure that these stitches stay separate from the gusset and sole of the foot. Then once I've knit all of the top stitches, I'm going to kind of rearrange things again so that these bottom stitches are a little bit closer to the left-hand needle, and pull the other out so that they're all separated out. And then I'm going to pick up 18 more stitches along the selvage edge so that we have our round. So there's 1, 2. We're ready to start working in the round again, but before we did that, I just wanted to kind of explain what's going on here. So we have the top of the foot stitches here. These are going to continue being worked in K2, P2 ribbing. And then we're going to just kind of assume that our beginning of the round is somewhere in here on these bottom stitches. It's not really that big of a deal right now because what we're going to be most concerned about is this little area right here. So if you're working on smaller needles, it might be a good idea to put a marker right in between where the top meets the gusset stitches. So right in here, because we're going to go off of those markers for our decreases. So what I'm going to do is knit across all of the stitches that I have on the bottom of my foot and all of these gusset stitches until there are 3 stitches remaining. So I'm going to go until right here. If you have a marker, the marker is going to be here, and then I'll have 3 stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and knit until that. And then when I have 3 stitches remaining, I'm going to knit those next 2 together as if they were 1 stitch. And I'm going to knit that last stitch. And then when I turn my work here, I'm going to go ahead and work the top of the foot stitches as I have been, making sure to keep those stitches separate. I'm going to knit 1, purl 2, knit 2, all the way across the top of the foot here. Knit that last stitch. And now, to even out that gusset decrease, I'm going to put the bottom sock stitches on my needle, pull that other one out, and I'm going to knit that first stitch and then work a slip, slip, knit. So I'm going to slip those first 2 stitches knitwise and then knit them through the back loop, and then knit kind of to the beginning of my round so that we're all on the same page here. So we're back at the beginning of our round and we've just completed our first row of decreased gusset stitches, and now we're going to work 1 row even. So I'm going to knit all of the stitches on the bottom here. So I'm going to knit right over those stitches that we decreased on the last row. I'm going to work K2, P2 ribbing over the top of the stitches here, or the top of the foot stitches. And then I'm going to go ahead and knit to the beginning of the round again. And we're going to repeat those 2 rounds until there are 36 stitches on both needles. So we'll be back to a 72 stitch count for our entire sock. I'm going to go ahead and knit to the beginning of my round again. And now I'll work another decrease round by knitting till 3 stitches before my marker. Knit 2 together, knit 1, work K2, P2 ribbing over the top stitches, and then I'm going to knit 1 stitch, slip, slip, knit, and follow it up with 1 round of no decreases. And I'm going to continue that until my total stitch count is 72, so I have 36 stitches on both needles. Once you've completed the gusset decreases and you have 72 total stitches, or 36 on each side, then you can go ahead and just omit the decrease rounds. So you'll knit all of the stitches on the bottom of the foot, and on the top of the foot you'll work K2, P2 ribbing, and you want to work like that until your sock measures 2 inches less than the total length of the foot you are knitting for. Now that the sock is 2 inches less than the total length of the foot, I'm going to start shaping for the toe. And the first round, I'm going to move the beginning of my round and I'm going to put it right in between here. So I've just finished the bottom of the foot stitches and I'm going to start working on the top, and this is where my new beginning of round is. And I'm going to go ahead and knit 1 round even. So I'm going to go ahead and knit all of the stitches as I come to them. So even across these ribbed stitches, I'm just going to knit all of them to set up for the toe, and I'm going to end right at my new beginning of round here. The first round of the toe is now complete, so we're going to do a decrease round. And in order to do this, I'm going to knit the first stitch of the round, and then I'm going to work a slip slip knit, or SSK. So I'm going to slip the first stitch knitwise and the second also knitwise, and then I'm going to go ahead and bring my left hand needle back through both of those stitches and knit behind them. This creates a left leaning decrease, and I'm going to knit until 3 stitches before the other side of the foot. So I'm going to knit across these top stitches here until there are 3 left. And once I have 3 left on the top of the foot here, I'm going to mirror that first decrease, and on these 2 stitches I'm going to work a K2 together. So I'm going to knit both of those stitches as if they were 1 stitch, and go ahead and knit the last stitch of the top of the foot. I'm going to repeat the same thing on the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and knit that first stitch, work a slip slip knit. So I'm going to slip 2 stitches knitwise and then knit them together through the back loop. Then I'm going to knit till 3 stitches before my beginning of round. Then when I have 3 stitches remaining, I'm going to knit the next 2 stitches together as if they were 1, and knit the last stitch to complete my decrease round. So I'm going to repeat those last 2 rounds until there are 24 total stitches on my sock, or 12 stitches on each needle here. So just to go over what I did, I'm going to work 1 round where I knit all of the stitches, follow that up with a decrease round where I knit the first stitch, work a slip slip knit, Knit until 3 stitches before the end of my first group of stitches here. Knit 2 together. Knit 1. And repeat those decreases on the bottom of my foot. So knit 1, slip, slip, knit, then knit until 3 before the end, knit the next 2 together, knit 1, and continue working those 2 rounds until there are 24 stitches remaining, or 12 stitches on each needle. My toe is now complete, so I'm going to go on to the last step, which is to graft these stitches together so that it is all nice and closed up. And to do this, I'm going to take a fairly good length of tail here, and I'm going to cut it, and then I'll slip a tapestry needle onto that tail. And I'm going to be using the Kitchener Graft. So I have my stitches all nice and lined up here so that the top of the foot stitches are in front and the bottom ones are in the back. And to set everything up, I'm going to take my tapestry needle and put it through that first stitch on the front needle purlwise. So I'm going from back to front, right through that loop, and I'm going to leave that loop there for the moment, and I'm going to take my tapestry needle and slip it knitwise through the first stitch on the back needle. And once again, I'm going to just leave that loop right there. And now I'm going to do a 4-stitch repeat over the rest of the stitches. So I'm going to go back to the first stitch on my front needle and slip purlwise, so front to back. And while I'm doing this, I'm also going to pull that first loop up and over the edge of my needle. So that one is completely done. And before I move on to the back, I'm also going to slip my tapestry needle purlwise through what's now the new first stitch of my front needle. So now I can go back to that back needle, and I'm going to go back to front, so purlwise on that first stitch, and pull that off. And then on that next one, I'm going to go knitwise, so front to back. And I'm going to work all of the stitches that way. So I'm going to go knitwise on that first stitch of the front needle, slip it off, purlwise on the next, then I'm going to go purlwise on the first stitch of the back needle, slip it off. Gotta be careful not to lose my front stitch yet. And then I'm going to go knitwise on the next, all the way across. When there are 2 stitches left, all you have to do is slip the needle knitwise on that first stitch, purlwise on that back stitch, and slip the needles out. Now all that's remaining is to weave in all of the remaining ends and block if you'd like. So here is my fully blocked sock. All you have to do is repeat all of those instructions for the other foot and you are done. I really love this pattern. The ribbed socks are a really nice kind of beginner sock pattern because they are very flexible in their sizing. Because they've got all that ribbing, it really forms to your foot pretty well, but then it can also stretch pretty well as well. How many times can I say well in a row? Anyway, yeah, I love how these turned out. I hope you guys did too. And if you do end up making these, certainly tag me on Instagram. I'll leave my information linked below. I would love to see your finished projects. As for right now, I think I'm gonna get going, but thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!